Am I dimmer every day? Am I just a little glimmer, like a tiny bobbing head of an ocean swimmer? Ollie, ollie, oxen free. Can you see me?
The third album for Brooklyn band Bishop Allen is Grrr, released locally through Longtime Listener, and it continues the lyrical delights of their previous records, conjuring alluring images of rooftop fights, shattered teacups and crying on the front porch swing. But even by their own words, Bishop Allen are singing about riding the darkest horse and spitting out the bitter rind to the soundtrack of sweet melodies, sprightly rhythms and playful arrangements. It's an interesting dichotomy for the pop band, which centres on the core of Justin Rice and Christian Rudder, both multi-talented fellas on record, in film and in print. One half of that core, Justin Rice, joins us now on Tape Relay. Hi, Justin.
Hi, how are you?
Good, thanks. Now, on the EPs in the last album, there was a much more telling narrative to the songs. I think someone might have even described it as the Bishop Allen backstory. But Grrr seems to be much more cryptic, more flashes of images than journey stories. Why is that, do you think?
I think that we wanted to try something different, and we just wanted to like sort of put aside storytelling for a moment, and I don't know, just like work on songs that had more to do with turns of phrase and wordplay and lyrics that were sort of like responses to what the songs were doing themselves. I don't know, it's like at a certain point you get tired of explaining everything and you just kind of want to say some words and see how the songs shape around a different approach.
I like the use of particular phrases in your songs, actually the ones that sort of carry a whole history behind them. You sing about Pliny the Elder and the elephants of ancient Rome and endless filibusters to stall for time and Ollie Ollie Oxenfree from the game of hide and seek, which, by the way, I actually had to Google because I don't think anyone in Australia actually uses that phrase.
Really? Yeah, we used to use it a lot when I was a kid. Yeah.
Right. When you put them in the context of a sentence, it's almost like there's so much left unsaid.
Yeah, I think that in a lot of ways, it was something I was thinking about, and something that even I think comes up in the lyrics is the idea of like shade. If there's like unrelenting sun, and everything's clear and everything's in positive space, but sometimes it just can make your head throb and just feel like over explanation, And so I think that part of what we were trying to do was write songs that had more shade in them, more places where we can like sort of puzzle out what the meaning of the lyric is, but what's left unsaid is you like sort of have to figure out what's left unsaid and how that like actually shapes the meaning of the song.
So are you conscious about collecting phrases in that way?
Yeah, I keep basically especially for this last record, I kept basically what was like a commonplace book, like in Victorian times. And I guess now, obviously, I did this and do this still. Like, as I'm reading something, if I come across something, like just a phrase that I like, I write it down. Or if I'm like walking around and I overhear something, I write it down. Or if just something pops into my head, I write it down. And I ended up with this like notebook that was full of just like a lot of phrases. And so a lot of the songs like were sort of built based on just like phrases taken from bits and pieces of the world around, and then like sort of constructed into some sort of whole.
A great quote from you, Justin, in a previous interview refers to the idea of working around concepts, that the songs don't have to be flawless, but you just have to adhere to an interesting concept. How does that work for you in the context of this album?
Well, I think that for me, writing a song is almost like a method of thinking. It's like if a phrase pops into my head, or if I read a phrase, like for instance, the song on this record, The Ancient Common Sense of Things, like I was reading an essay by this British essayist, basically, G.K. Chesterton, and just in the context of that essay, which was really about eccentric people at the British Library, he said something about like how books have a certain appeal to people the same as a blacksmith's hammer. It's something, it's the ancient common sense of things that you understand when you hold it. And I was like, that's an interesting idea, the idea that somehow objects are like imbued with their own essence, and that that they like just sort of the way that certain very simple objects work signifies something or have some like sort of appeal or resonance with like real life. So in the process of thinking about that idea, I tried to just like sort of write it out. So basically the song becomes an attempt to think through the thought.
And oh, the ancient common sense of things. And
So with objects, it could be almost like the way a musician, utilises his guitar and is almost part of it.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I mean, and even for us, like we've always, like writing songs has often been about picking up an instrument that we don't necessarily understand and working our way through it. And like obviously an instrument wants to be played in certain ways, and as you sort of like discover what those ways are, a lot of the times it will reveal a method of writing a song,
Did you use different kind of instrumentation or ways to write songs, musically speaking, on this record?
Yeah, we did. I mean, we really started doing that with the EPs because I think every single song that we wrote prior to the EPs was written on a guitar. And on the EPs, we started writing songs on piano and banjo and ukulele. And on this record, we wrote a lot of songs around rhythms. So, we'd be writing them on the drums and percussion and, like, working from a bed of rhythm. Or a lot of songs on this record were written on the marimba. We got a commercial fisherman in Long Island who builds marimbas as a hobby, like built us a marimba. And it was just, it's this really beautiful homemade instrument, but it's not fancy, and it sounds a particular way. It's like funky, but it has pitch. And so that instrument, for instance, I think, which featured pretty heavily on the album, also was the sort of instigator of some of the songs, because you start to play it and you start to hear something that you might not hear if you picked up a guitar.
Now, you mentioned these EPs, which was a year of monthly EPs back in 2006. And,
yeah,
this album was written over, obviously, a much shorter period of time where the tracks from your last record were actually reworkings of those EPs. Does that mean that you had less time to mull over the stories or be, less finicky, perhaps? I mean, I could see that as both being a good thing and a bad thing.
Yeah, I think that with this album, we wanted it to feel a little bit like spontaneous and to feel like it all came out of the same like sort of writing session. And there's something nice about that because you're not trying, I don't know, you feel like the record that you're making is about a particular moment and isn't like a statement in general. It's just like, here's where we are right now. The downside is that, it's like you don't get to compare yourself for a period of time and pick songs in general that you like the most. It's just kind of what you've got that you can work with.
You kept quite a pace when you were releasing the monthly EPs and doing it off your own bat as well. When you go back to recording just one record at a time, is there a challenge of even just trying to push the songcrafting process along further?
Yeah, I think that every time we write new songs, you want to have the feeling that they're the best songs that you've ever written. I think in general, whenever you're doing something, you want to feel like you're getting somewhere, that you're pushing your abilities further, that you're coming up with something that you couldn't have come up with the time before. I don't know, I got to say that the process of putting out record by record doesn't appeal to me as much as the process of putting out, say, the EPs. And I don't know what we're going to do now. Like, I don't know if the songs that we're writing now are going to end up just being a single release or something special. I feel like the way, in many ways, like a full length feels like a relic from a different age. And now that you can release music in almost like any quantity, whether it's a song at a time or 4 songs at a time or 100 songs at a time, like I don't necessarily feel like I want to get trapped into the very staid idea of an album and an album cycle.
That's an interesting way of looking at it. Perhaps we can see a series of MP3s coming out from Bishop Allen.
Yeah, something.
So what are you working on at the moment, thematically wise? Are there things that you're aware of?
To a certain extent, like a lot of the songs have to do with like books that I happen to be reading or things like people that I'm reading that kind of are resonating with me at a given moment. And like right now, there are a lot of essayists like Joan Didion and E.B. White, people like that who write these like sort of almost like memoir-like essays, but they have this like very frank tone, and in general, they have pretty keen insights, and they also move like pretty adroitly through some thought process. And there's something about those essays, and I'm not sure exactly how it's going to like manifest itself in writing, but there's something about those kinds of essays that's pretty interesting to me right now. And they also feel really modern. There's something about the Gurr record where some parts of it feel, and even like the aesthetic of the EPs, parts of it feels like very almost like Victorian in its images and in its sort of language. And these things feel like real fresh and contemporary. And there's something about that I think is kind of starting to turn into songs over here.
So we'll revisit you in a couple of month's time or a year's time to see where those songs are at then.
Yeah, well, the thing is, I always think I know where songs are going to come from and what they're going to be like, and then when we actually start hammering through them and turning them into fully formed entities, they're never what I expected.
Well, thank you, Justin, for your time on Tape Relay.
Thank you.
The morning belonged to the grapefruit, ripe in the gold Roman sun. I throw out the right, it's just bitter to me. Done, done, done. The skyline is made of the umbrella pine. I wish we could climb everyone, but all I would see in the shade of the streets. Done, done, done. Cue the elephants, the torches they light in the woods. Can you and me save the city? I thought that we promised we would. But you got your hands in your pockets, and you can't look me in the eye. And now for that eternal question, why? And he would look at those starlings, together they swoop down as one. He'd read in that dizzy ellipsis, done, done, done. We dangle our legs in the fountains, the pail is red anon. The aqueduct water is ancient, done, done, done.